In a small coastal town, two souls find themselves caught in the pull of an impossible love. Mira Ellison, a spirited yet introverted artist, finds solace in painting sunsets over the ocean, each stroke of her brush a tribute to the life she hopes to lead. Finn Calder, a reserved astrophysicist, returns to his childhood town after losing his wife and son in a tragic accident. He is a man who has spent his life studying the cosmos, but now finds himself lost in a universe of grief. When their worlds collide, Mira's warmth begins to thaw Finn's icy detachment, while his quiet resilience inspires her to face her own fears. However, as they navigate the fragile threads of their burgeoning relationship, a devastating truth surfaces. Mira has a terminal heart condition, one that leaves her life hanging by a thread. As Mira's health deteriorates, and Finn fights against time to find solace in the heavens he once studied, the two must confront the inevitability of loss and the gravity of love that defies all reason. Will their love be enough to transcend the boundaries of life and death? Or will they be left with the aching realization that some stars are destined to burn out before their time? Chapter 1. When the universe shifts. The waves roared against the shore as Mira Ellison sat cross-legged on the sand, her easel steady despite the fierce coastal wind. The sun bled into the horizon, staining the sky in hues of amber and violet. Each stroke of her brush felt like an exhale, a release of the heaviness that often pressed against her chest. She glanced at the canvas and frowned. It wasn't right. It never was. "You paint like you're trying to outrun something," a voice said behind her, deep and uninvited. Startled, Mira turned. A man stood there, his frame tall and wiry, his dark hair streaked with the faintest touch of silver. He was older, though his eyes, gray, sharp, and haunting, held the weight of someone who had lived lifetimes. "I didn't realize I had an audience," Mira said, her voice tinged with sarcasm to mask her unease. He smirked faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not much for art, but you're passionate." "And you're a critic?" "Not quite." He hesitated, then extended a hand. Finn Calder. Her fingers hovered before shaking his hand briefly. "Mira." For a moment, silence hung between them. The ocean's relentless rhythm was the only sound filling the void of what neither dared to say. Finn looked at her canvas again. "You missed the streak of indigo," he said softly, pointing to the sky. Mira stared at him, taken aback by his unexpected observation. "You're not as clueless about art as you claim," he shrugged. "I just pay attention." Chapter 2. The Weight of Loss. Finn sat at the edge of his childhood home's balcony that night, staring up at the night sky. The stars seemed dimmer, like the cosmos itself mourned his loss. He remembered nights like this with Lily, his wife, and their son, Alex, lying on a blanket under the vast expanse. He used to tell Alex stories of constellations and how, someday, they'd discover new worlds together. But Alex was gone, and so was Lily. A drunk driver had shattered their dreams, leaving Finn to drift alone in the aftermath. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in months, the memory of Mira's face emerged. Her eyes weren't just brown, they were warm, like the earth on a sunlit day, grounding yet infinite. Something about her stirred a feeling he thought had died with his family. Chapter 3. Falling Like Stars. Mira knew something was wrong when she fainted while cleaning her studio. Dr. Harris's face was grim when he told her the news. "It's progressing faster than we anticipated," he said, his voice heavy. "Your heart can't keep up much longer. You'll need a transplant, Mira. Soon." She nodded, numb. She had always known her heart condition would cut her life short, but the timeline had been blurry, distant. Until now. Finn found her later that day, sitting on the pier staring into the ocean. "Do you ever feel like the universe has it out for you?" she asked without turning to face him. "All the time," he replied. She looked at him, her eyes glassy. "Then why do you keep going?" Finn thought for a long moment. "Because I can't let the darkness win." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she let someone hold her as she wept. The story continues to intertwine their lives, painting a vivid and heartbreaking portrait of love in the face of an inevitable loss. Finn becomes Mira's anchor as her health worsens, while she teaches him how to love again despite his grief. The tragedy is not just in Mira's condition, but in the timing of their connection, how they found each other, just as they were destined to part. Chapter 4. Echoes of the Past. Mira stood in front of her mirror, her reflection a ghost of who she once was. Her once rosy cheeks had hollowed, her dark hair thin and limp against her pale skin. Yet her eyes still held fire, a stubborn defiance against the fate she knew awaited her. The sound of a knock startled her, and she glanced at the door. Finn's familiar silhouette was visible through the frosted glass. "I thought you'd want some company," he said as she opened the door. He held a small box in his hands, wrapped in plain brown paper. "What's this?" she asked, her voice lighter than she felt. "Something that's been collecting dust in my attic." She opened the box carefully and gasped. Inside was a small telescope, its brass fittings polished to a dull shine. "It's beautiful," she said, her fingers tracing the cold metal. "It was Alex's," Finn said softly. His voice trembled slightly, and she looked up to find his expression distant, lost. "Finn, it's okay," he interrupted, forcing a small smile. "I think he'd want you to have it. You remind me of him in a way." Mira bit her lip, unsure how to respond. The weight of his grief hung in the air between them, yet she felt honored by his gesture. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, they sat on the beach, the telescope perched on its tripod between them. Finn adjusted it, pointing it toward the heavens, while Mira watched him intently. "You know, the stars we see now are millions of years old," he said, his voice soft and thoughtful. "By the time their light reaches us, they've already died." Mira looked up at the sky, her heart aching with the poetic truth of his words. "It's sad, isn't it, that something so beautiful can only be seen after it's gone?" Finn turned to her, his gaze steady. "Maybe it's not about how long they shine, but how brightly." She didn't respond, but her chest tightened at the weight of his words. Finn's presence was like gravity, pulling her toward him, grounding her even as her body betrayed her. Chapter 5. The Fragility of Now. Over the next few weeks, Finn and Mira became inseparable. He brought her books on astronomy, and she shared her favorite poetry. They spent hours walking the shoreline, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound. But beneath their growing connection lay the unspoken truth. Mira's condition was worsening. One evening, as they sat by the fire in Finn's living room, Mira noticed a framed photo on the mantel. It was of Finn, a beautiful woman with kind eyes, and a little boy with an impish grin. "She was stunning," Mira said softly, nodding toward the picture. Finn followed her gaze, his expression softening. "Lily, she had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world who mattered. And Alex?" Finn's face brightened momentarily. "He was everything good in me. Smart, curious, so full of life." Mira reached out, placing her hand over his. "You talk about them like they're still here." "In a way, they are," Finn said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I look at the stars, I feel them watching." Mira swallowed hard, her chest tightening, not from her illness, but from the overwhelming love and pain in his voice. "Finn," she said after a long pause, "do you ever wish you'd never loved them? That it would hurt less?" He looked at her, startled. "Never. The pain is the price we pay for love, Mira, and I'd pay it 1,000 times over just to have had them in my life." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Finn reached out, brushing them away with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "You're worth it too," he said softly. "Don't forget that." Chapter 6. The Fragile Thread. Mira sat on the examination table, her legs swinging nervously as Dr. Harris reviewed her latest test results. His silence was heavy, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "Mira," he began, his voice low, "your heart is working at less than 20% capacity. I don't want to alarm you, but we're running out of time." She nodded, though her chest felt tight, not from fear, but from resignation. "Is there a donor?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Harris shook his head. "Not yet, but we're monitoring closely. I promise you, we're doing everything we can." She forced a small smile, though it felt hollow. "I know you are. Thank you." As she left the clinic, the weight of her reality pressed down on her. She walked aimlessly, her feet taking her to the beach where she and Finn had spent so many evenings. When she saw him sitting on their usual driftwood log, she hesitated. She didn't want to tell him, didn't want to see the pain in his eyes. But when he looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that made her feel seen, she realized she couldn't keep it from him. "I thought you had a meeting," Finn said as she approached. "It ended early," she lied, sitting beside him. He studied her face, his expression softening. "You've been crying." Mira turned away, staring at the horizon. "It's nothing. Just life." "Mira," he said gently, his hand covering hers, "you don't have to pretend with me." Her shoulders shook as the tears came, unbidden and unstoppable. "It's getting worse," she whispered. "They can't find a donor, Finn, and I don't think they will in time." He didn't say anything at first, just pulled her into his arms and held her as she cried. "You're not alone in this," he said finally, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Whatever happens, I'm here, always." Chapter 7. A Universe of Us. The days turned into weeks, and Mira's health continued to decline. She grew weaker, her steps slower, her breaths shorter. Yet she refused to let her illness define her remaining days. One evening, Finn surprised her with a picnic under the stars. The telescope sat beside them, and he had laid out a blanket filled with her favorite foods. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice tinged with laughter. "Consider it an apology for all the boring lectures about space," he teased, helping her settle onto the blanket. "Boring? Hardly. I've learned more about the universe from you than I ever thought I'd care to know." He smiled, his expression soft. "Good, because tonight I want to show you something special." He adjusted the telescope, pointing it toward a bright star near the horizon. "That's Betelgeuse," he explained. "A red supergiant. It's one of the largest stars we can see, but it's nearing the end of its life." Mira leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Doesn't it scare you, knowing it'll be gone someday?" "Not really," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Because even when it goes, its light will keep traveling. For millions of years, people will look up and see it, not knowing it's already gone. It'll still matter." She closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. "I wish I could leave something behind like that," she murmured. "You already have," Finn said, his voice tight. "In me." Mira looked up at him, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his eyes. She reached up, her fingers brushing against his cheek. "Finn, He didn't let her finish. His lips met hers, tentative at first, then deepening as if the universe itself had conspired to pull them together. It was a kiss full of desperation, of love, of a desire to hold on even as everything threatened to slip away. When they finally pulled apart, Mira's eyes were filled with tears. "I'm scared, Finn." "I know," he whispered, holding her close, "but we'll face it together, no matter how much time we have." Chapter 8. The Final Orbit. The air in the hospital room was sterile, suffused with the faint beeping of monitors. Mira lay in bed, her face pale but serene. Finn sat beside her, clutching her hand as if willing his strength into her failing body. "I hate hospitals," she said, her voice weak but laced with humor. "The lighting's terrible." Finn chuckled despite the lump in his throat. "You'd still manage to make them beautiful if you painted them." She smiled faintly, her fingers tightening around his. "I think this is it, Finn. I can feel it." His chest constricted. "Don't say that." "It's okay," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "I'm not afraid anymore. You've given me something I didn't think I'd ever have, a reason to fight, to love, to hope." Tears slid down Finn's face, unbidden and relentless. "I'm not ready to lose you." Mira reached up, her hand brushing against his cheek. "You'll never lose me. I'll be in every sunset, every star you look at through that telescope. You'll feel me, Finn. Always." He nodded, his breath hitching as he leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. The door opened suddenly, and Dr. Harris stepped in. His expression was unreadable, but in his hand was a clipboard with a single sheet of paper. "There's a donor," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "It's not perfect, but it's a match." Finn's heart leaped and plummeted all at once. Relief battled with fear as he looked at Mira, whose eyes widened in shock. "What's the risk?" Finn asked, his voice hoarse. "It's significant," Dr. Harris admitted. Given Mira's condition, the surgery will be incredibly difficult, but without it. He didn't finish. Mira's gaze flickered between Finn and Dr. Harris. "I need a moment," she whispered. Dr. Harris nodded and stepped out. Finn stayed, his hands trembling as they held hers. "Mira," he said, his voice breaking, "please, you have to try." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Finn, what if I don't wake up? What if this is goodbye?" "Then let it be goodbye fighting," he said fiercely. "Don't give up, Mira, not yet." She opened her eyes, her gaze locking with his. In that moment, something shifted, an unspoken agreement passing between them. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll fight, for you." Epilogue: The Gravity of Love. Finn sat alone on the beach, the telescope beside him, its brass fittings catching the light of the setting sun. The waves crashed softly, their rhythm steady and eternal. He looked up at the night sky, at the faint glow of Betelgeuse on the horizon. His fingers traced the edge of a letter in his pocket. One Mira had written before the surgery. He hadn't opened it yet, afraid of what it might say, afraid of the finality it might bring. The past weeks had been a blur of waiting, of hoping, of fearing. The surgery had been long, and complications had arisen. The doctors had been vague, their words carefully chosen, their eyes hesitant. Finn's gaze returned to the telescope, and he adjusted it, aiming it at the stars. He thought of Mira's smile, her laughter, her resilience. He thought of the way she'd whispered his name like a prayer. He unfolded the letter with trembling hands. "Finn, if you're reading this, it means I've either made it or I haven't. Either way, I need you to know that loving you was the greatest thing I've ever done. You showed me that even in the face of darkness, there's light worth chasing. If I'm gone, don't let the grief consume you. Look to the stars and remember that I'm there in every beam of light. And if I'm still here, well, I guess we have a lifetime to make up for lost time. Yours always, Mira." Finn's chest tightened, tears streaming down his face as he looked back at the stars. In the distance, the faint sound of someone calling his name drifted on the wind. He froze, his breath catching. Was it real or just a memory? He turned toward the sound, his heart pounding as the waves roared louder, the stars above shimmering brighter. And then the page turned blank. Did Mira survive, her voice calling to Finn, or was it the echo of her memory? Did the surgery succeed, or was her spirit forever a part of the stars?